Welcome. Thank you for joining us for a really special evening and conversation. My name is Joseph Bogart. I'm the executive director of the Save Our Wild Salmon Coalition. And before I introduce tonight's guest, Rena Priest, I want to make a few quick announcements and acknowledgments. I'll start with a land acknowledgement. I am joining you this evening from the traditional lands of the Coast Salish people, including the Lummi Nation, of whom our guest this evening is a member. The Coast Salish people have lived in this area, the greater Puget Sound Salish Sea, since time immemorial, and have stewarded and continue to steward these homelands today. We are all joining this conversation from different places. We all live and work in traditional Indigenous homelands and communities, and I encourage you, if you are not already doing so, to take some time and learn about them, their histories, their present cultures and communities, and look for ways to support their efforts and activities on behalf of healthy waters, lands, and communities, programs that benefit everyone. This is the third and final SOS webinar this fall, part of our 2025 Reciprocity series. Our series this fall features three thoughtful, provocative, and hopeful writers and thinkers. Tonight, we'll spend time with poet and essayist Rena Priest. Previously, we had a wonderful conversation with Christopher Preston in September and Linda Mapes in October. We have recorded these webinars. The first two are now available on our website and our SOS YouTube page. We're proud to co-host this webinar this evening with Raven Chronicles Press and North Cascades Institute. Phoebe Bosch leads the Raven Chronicles Press, which recently published Positively Uncivilized. Raven Chronicles is a nonprofit independent publishing press and literary organization established in Seattle in 1991. It strives to publish and showcase work that embodies the cultural diversity of writers and artists, work that expresses family and forebears, and work that connects with the soil, water, and air of place and home. I also want to welcome Britt Coy to join us and say hello and introduce the North Cascades Institute.
Thank you, Joseph, for the introduction and for inviting North Cascades Institute to be part of the webinar this evening. And hello and welcome to everyone joining us. I appreciate this opportunity to tell you a bit more about the Institute's work before we get started. Since 1986, North Cascades Institute has been inspiring environmental stewardship through transformative learning experiences in nature. With a broad range of online and field classes, youth programs, volunteer opportunities, and community events, we help people of all ages explore the beauty and diversity of the North Cascades ecosystem. Programs like Mountain School and Youth Leadership Adventures invite students to connect with nature and one another in a classroom without walls and discover their place in the world as someone intricately connected to the web of life. Since the very beginning, the Institute has taught at the confluence of art and science, believing that the humanities provide an important lens through which we inhabit and understand our shared landscapes. By joining our community for conversations like this, North Cascades Institute hopes to amplify the voices of authors like Rena, promoting a deep sense of reciprocity with the natural world and inspiring us to come together to foster healthy ecosystems where all species can thrive. If you'd like to learn more about our work and all the ways you can connect and learn with us, I invite you to visit our website at ncascades.org. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Britt. And thank you, Phoebe, and thank you, Britt, and Raven Chronicles Press and North Cascades Institute for co-hosting this webinar this evening. We're honored to be partnering with you. I also want to thank the Natural Encounters Conservation Fund, who generously sponsored our Reciprocity webinar series this year. Now I quickly want to review our program for the evening. In a moment, I'll introduce Rena, and she will talk about and read from her new book and share a short video and some poetry as well. After Rena's presentation, she and I will chat for a couple of minutes, and then we'll open up the conversation for Q&A with you, our audience. It is a great honor to welcome our special guest, Rena Priest. Rena and I first crossed paths 5 or 6 years ago when she reached out when she was working on an article about the southern resident orcas. We then met up again more recently during her tenure as the 6th Washington State Poet Laureate. Her term was 2021 to 2023. She was editing a book at the time, a wonderful anthology of salmon poetry written by people from across Washington State. I Sing the Salmon Home was published by Empty Bowl Press, and Rena and Empty Bowl invited SOS and our work to be highlighted in the anthology. It was a great honor and led to some new and renewed relationships and projects that continue today. I think she's going to read a couple of poems from that collection this evening. And I was also honored when Rena reached out this spring to share an early copy of her new collection of essays, Positively Uncivilized. I had not read her essays previously, though I knew her poetry, and I found myself really dazzled by her stories and reflections. The collection is, in turns, engaging, moving, poignant, heartbreaking, personal, humorous, and much more. And there are twists and turns and a weaving together of different pieces in unique and provocative ways. It is, in my opinion, nonfiction storytelling at its best. Positively Uncivilized was selected by Raven Chronicles Press for its Keepers of the Fire Award. The collection was published in September 2025, and I just learned from Phoebe that it's been their best-selling book ever. Rena Priest is an enrolled member of the Lhaq'temish, or Lummi Nation. She's the recipient of numerous awards and fellowships, including the 2024 Washington State Book Award, the 2020 Allied Arts Foundation Professional Poets Award, and the 2018 American Book Award. In 2022, she was named the Maxine Kushing Gray Distinguished Writing Fellow by the University of Washington Libraries. She's received fellowships from the Academy of American Poets and Indigenous Nations Poets. In 2024, she served as a judge for the 50th Annual National Book Award. The list goes on, but I'll stop there. Her poetry and nonfiction appear widely online and in print. Rena holds an MFA from Sarah Lawrence College. Welcome, Rena. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Hi, Shka. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, SOS and Raven Chronicles and North Cascades Institute. So grateful to be here. Ai tangan nostalgia. O helixon quanasat latiakais. Sahwaltanat sanasnat chachlamisan. Gosh, what a wonderful event. Thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm going to jump right in and I'm going to start with this essay that appears in my book, Positively Uncivilized, and it's called Reciprocity in the Age of Extinction. Every year, my tribe, the Lummi Nation, located in the Pacific Northwest corner of Washington State, hosts a first salmon ceremony to honor the return of the first salmon of the season, the spring Chinook. This ceremony is conducted as an acknowledgement of the reciprocal relationship between people and salmon. We are told the story of Salmon Woman who saved us from starvation by sacrificing her children to nourish the people. The story contains the values and practices that uphold our sacred obligation to care for and respect the salmon for their sacrifice. We honor the first salmon according to custom. We sing songs and offer prayers. Each person in attendance is given a piece of the fish to eat. We are instructed to put the bones aside to be collected and returned to the sea. This is done so the salmon can swim back to Salmon Woman and tell her that we have honored her gift and that we are carrying this sacred relationship forward to the new generation by telling her story and following her instructions on how to care for the fish. Never waste salmon, offer gratitude, and never turn your nose up to their gift. Practice respect and care for the rivers and waterways they inhabit. Acknowledge the rules such as never bathing in areas where salmon spawn or dumping waste of any kind into rivers. Only take what you need. Let nobody go hungry while the catch is being shared. Never abuse the gift or it will not be there for the people in the future. The story and its instructions teach us how to be in resonance with the laws of nature. By acknowledging our obligation to follow certain rules that govern a delicately balanced ecosystem, we are practicing reciprocity. Since ancient times, the practice of reciprocation has been a powerful cultural force throughout the world. It is only very recently that as a global species, we have stopped practicing equal give and take relationships with the planet's non-human communities and adopted a one-way relationship of extraction to serve the short-sighted interests of a select few. I believe the shift was caused by our turning away from localized nature-based beliefs to adopt homogeneous patriarchal religions, which established a hierarchy that places men at the top, with all other life on the planet subjected to their whims and existing for their exclusive use and benefit. We started calling trees and fish and animals natural resources. That allowed us not to think of them as having their own autonomous purpose. They became commodities over which we are guided by divine edict or among secular people by force of custom and assumed human supremacy to exploit. Think of Inter Cetera, the papal bull of 1493, under which the doctrine of discovery was established. Think of manifest destiny. Think of any legislative act or court decision upholding the rights of corporations or the rights of people and animals to have access to clean water and a healthy environment. In 1880, John Waller and the Alaska Packers Association destroyed a Lummi fishing village that had been in use for millennia. They forced the fishers to leave using threats of violence. In 1895, Lummi filed a case against the Alaska Packers Association in an attempt to uphold our treaty rights to fish in our usual and accustomed fishing grounds. The village was a source of social and cultural exchange, as well as a place to harvest sustenance in accordance with a contract of reciprocity with the natural world, which would allow the community to be fed by its abundance in perpetuity. Nets were woven with willow bark, and people harvested in a manner that involved no bycatch or destruction to surrounding landscapes or waterways. The Alaska Packers Association saw an opportunity to partake in this bounty, and rather than honor the laws of reciprocity, they displaced the indigenous fishers and usurped their village site to be used as the new location for a canning facility. Environmentally friendly indigenous harvest practices were replaced by the installation of fish traps that caught humpback and pink salmon as well as Chinook. In 1897, the court ruled against the Lummi, saying the treaty had not been violated. It is not competent for this court to interfere by an injunction with the fish traps of the Alaska Packers Association, decreed the court, which are authorized and licensed by the law of the state. Let there be a decree dismissing the suit without costs. In a 1972 interview, Ronimus Lear, a Lummi elder, recalls an incident that he estimates to have occurred in 1913. When I was really young, the traps owned by white people would take in all the fish, but they dumped their humpbacks, the pinks. They just dumped thousands of them, and they were dying since they had been kept in the traps for so long. They drifted to shore and died. They had the whole Lego Bay just covered with dead fish. After they drifted away, the rocks were still oily from the fish. The rocks would shine on the beach and they smelled like hell. God, just thousands and thousands of dead fish. At this time, indigenous fishers were not permitted to harvest fish, and many worked in the canneries that had displaced them from the waterways and our ancient way of life. It must have been a spiritual blow to see our sacred food treated in such a way. In 1934, the fish traps were outlawed, but by then the fishery had sustained wide-scale devastation, and the practice of overfishing had established deep roots in our region. Too often, the science of fisheries management favors economic gain over ecological reality, resulting in a decline in fisheries worldwide. Rather than a science guided by laws of resonance and reciprocity, we are guided by a science of exploration and conquest, motivated by discovery and extraction of resources. Even worse, the innate human drive to honor the law of reciprocity is used to manipulate us into giving up our rights to clean water and a healthy environment in exchange for whatever compromise is on offer. The science of social psychology has identified a powerful negotiating strategy called reciprocal concessions procedure for inducing compliance. It operates on the understanding that if you are offered something and you refuse, then you are offered something in compromise. You are more likely to meet the compromise as an offer of your reciprocation. You might be familiar with it in retail settings where it is widely used to inflate the price that we're willing to pay for something by establishing a wildly expensive price point for the most desirable item, thereby making the middle range item seem reasonable. In the case of how we relate to nature, we are told that clean water and a healthy environment are much too costly. For example, oh, so you want a healthy fishery? Do you want to limit harvest, forgo hydroelectricity, and prohibit development to preserve habitat? No? Well, okay, how about we install a very scientifically sound fish hatchery operation, and you can have hydroelectricity and catch all the fish you want. It seems like a good deal. And that's the system we are in right now. That is the very scientific system by which we are trading away our ability to live on this planet without extirpating other species or driving them to extinction. The science that governs hatcheries is the same science that was implemented over 150 years ago to serve the interests of hydroelectricity. It is based on weak evidence of efficacy and has operated as a substitute for the sound science of conservation and habitat protection. It has allowed for excessive use of hydroelectric dams and overfishing and has not made good on the promised returns. But we continue to fall for it, to accept the thing that we don't really want in order to reciprocate the compromise offered by power companies, canneries, polluters, developers, and politicians. The spring Chinook, whom we Lummi honor in ceremony, face the threat of extinction. The southern resident orcas, icons of the Salish Sea, are relations under the waves whose primary food source is the Chinook salmon, face the threat of extinction. It is estimated that up to 1 million species are threatened with extinction within decades. Globally, Indigenous cultures are faced with losing knowledge and lifeways that connect them to their lands and waterways through sacred bonds of reciprocation. Are we ready to let it all go in order to hold on to a belief in man's place at the top of a hierarchy that requires no gift in exchange for the gifts of the natural world? Are we really ready to let it all go to avoid sacrificing anything at all in exchange for the sacrifices of Salmon Woman and her children? To avoid acknowledging the sacrifices of beings who die every day so we can live? I say we should splurge, decline the compromise, and instead make sacrifices in order to buy ourselves the nicest, most beautiful, and expensive item on offer, a sustainable and resonant relationship with our fellow creatures and this glorious living earth. An industrial fishery, and indeed industrial scale production of animals for human consumption, is not sustainable. It relies on the myth that you can have something for nothing. The law of conservation of energy states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. Over the last century, we've transformed a lot of life-giving energy into carbon. It's going to take more than technological innovation and creativity to restore balance. It's going to take a transformation of our most deeply held beliefs. In order to muster the willingness to enter into respectful, reciprocal relationships with nature, we must get something back for what we give, and what we get must feed our spirits as well as our bodies. In the Salmon Woman story, what we get is the gift of gratitude for salvation from starvation. What new story will nourish us in this way? What new powerful story will be the catalyst for our transformation? And before I move into the video, I'm going to share a poem that I read for the Washington State Legislature. And this is actually an updated version of that poem. It's called These Abundant and Generous Homelands, and it's also in the book. These abundant and generous homelands, warm at home in the long cold days of winter, how and why should it trouble our thoughts, that eternal question of the haves and have-nots? We are not thoughtless or hard of heart. We give what's fair, do our part. And the privileges we claim as our share, those we reserve without reservation, perhaps even unaware of our good fortune. Perhaps never having troubled deaf heaven with our bootless cries, we walk well heeled through our blessed lives with ease. Or maybe we stride with shrewd purpose in shoes made for long days of toil on our feet. You have yours and I have mine, and aren't most of us just trying to get by? But still, the hungry, they're always with us. And isn't the worry always that if we pause our labor too long to care too much, that we shall be counted among them? How can equality be anything but a utopian dream for those whose history and legends tell only of statesmen and kings, and those whose concerns are less and less for the justness of wars as much as they are for the accumulation of more, more, more? Yet we live on lands where equality bloomed once before, when indigenous nations lived by beliefs and followed ancient laws that said an orca whale and a cedar tree are sovereign, sentient beings with inviolable rights, just like you and me. Those beliefs are not childlike or primitive. They are the blueprint for a just and fair society, which for Native nations is not a vision, but a memory. That sublime belief in the wisdom and goodness of the giving earth is not so elusive, is not a birthright exclusive to tribes. Yes, it's mine, but it's yours too if you want it. If you want it, you must tell new stories, true stories, on which to build new beliefs, true beliefs, in the interconnection and value of all living things. The supremacy of man is only fiction. This is the secret every river knows. For water rises and falls, and in a circle eternally flows from the cloud to the mountain, through the valley to the sea. Thus is a circle a balanced, perfect, and natural state of being. And who are we to interrupt it? We do so at our peril. When the forests burn, our eyes burn, and our hearts fill with ashes, and when streams are dammed and wanting of salmon, doesn't our blood also want of vitality? This is the folly of hierarchy, with man at the top. We reap the fruit of inequity, a harvest of terrible hunger. Now is the hour of our reckoning, a moment of dire lack. Though unrehearsed, we must summon the courage and the will to act, to assure our children a better path forward. And when we look back, will we see that in fact we were not recovering from natural disasters, rather, we were the great disaster from which nature must recover. With hindsight for eyes, we must sail toward a beautiful new vision, an era that is trying but hopeful, demanding but healthy, whole, and equitable. We will be steadfast in our course, carried by the winds of change into a more balanced way of being. For while free will is at the whim of our human nature, nature loves balance, and so our nature is humane. To repair this world, we must recall a time when we did not have the things we think we need, but had the whole living earth for free. As long as the rivers run, as long as the tide flows, and as long as the sun shines, you will have land, fish and game for your frying pans, and timber for your lodges. These are the promises only the earth can make, and only in exchange for our reverence. And yet these were the promises made by a man in exchange for a treaty on which the foreign state was founded, here in these sacred homelands, where once the call of eagles resounded, resplendent from the tops of towering cedars, where none went hungry when salmon were running in clear, cool waters. These abundant and generous homelands were given in exchange for the promise of a world we could live in, a world that would keep giving to all in common for as long as the river runs. So that poem I wrote at the request of Governor Inslee's office to present at the opening of the joint legislature in 2023. 2020, yeah, 2023, right before I left my post and passed the laurels to the incoming poet laureate. So I read that in January, and then my term ended in April. But I was very honored to be asked, and there is one quote in there, and it's from the first territorial governor, Stevens, who said when making treaties with tribes, said, as long as the rivers run, as long as the tide flows, and as long as the sun shines, you will have land, fish and game for your frying pans, and timber for your lodges. And so I thought it important to include those promises with that audience in mind. So anyhow, next I have a video that I'm going to share that we're going to share, and it was produced by Fishboat Media for PBS as part of their Origin series, and this is part one in the docu-series, The Last Reef Netters, directed by Samuel Wolfe.
It's been a beautiful journey learning about my identity. When I was named, the elders told me, you're too young to know right now, but you're going to learn what your name means. I was receiving my grandmother's name, Sawaltanat. When I was starting out learning the language, I went to our hereditary chief, Salik, and I said, what does my name mean? He said, well, Tanat means the wife of, so you're Tanat of Sawalt. One of my teachers told me that a Sawalt is a spider web or a net. So it means the wife of the net.
We believe it was a gift from the Creator.
The reef net gives us life. It sustains us.
Such abundance for so many years, for millennia.
And they were run out at the point of a gun.
Lummi testified on the importance of the reef nets.
It was big business.
They appropriated any economy that the indigenous people had.
We must remember who we are and where we come from.
Because it is such a strong, important part of our history.
Okay. To the net wife, O ancient weaver, whose ancestral name I carry, how many hours of your life were spent gathering the wild-grown riches of our home? Willow roots and nettles for the reef net, the soft glow of mountainsides in winter, the sparkle of sun shining on summer rivers. This beauty wakes the ancestors inside me, calls forth memories of creeks overflowing with the red riches of spawning salmon. And I know your saltwater blood still runs in me, like a gift from salmon brought home from the dark of the ocean deep, carried high into rocky valleys against swift currents of sparkling streams, to dissolve and rise again like fog, burned away by the rising of a new day, to shine again in me. My eyes are your eyes, as one identity we see. Across thousands of generations we dance the dances of the salmon people, bear witness to endless turning tides and rolling waves. With your voice, I sing songs of praise. With the breath of your spirit, I lift prayers to the breeze. Like baby spiders with new silk kites, they soar high above the world and into the future. Like your prayers were carried across time to weave new webs, new nets, to catch nourishment for the people, to see hope, to speak love, to live to be an ember, a spark that carries our fire through the night.
The original people of the Salish Sea were saltwater people. They traveled by canoe. They had many gifts from the Creator. One of those gifts was the shwala, the reef net.
The way that it's set up is 2 canoes anchor side by side, and there's a false reef anchored below them. So when the salmon encounter the false reef, they swim up and into the net.
I think the most beautiful part of the old traditional reef nets were that there was purposely a hole in the back of the reef net. That was so at any one given time, not every fish was caught. That's so important. You don't catch the first, you don't catch the last.
We lived amongst the natural law. We had to allow our older brothers to continue on their struggle of life up to the headwaters.
The belief is that the reef net is like a womb, and the salmon swimming in provide the spark of life to carry the people into a new season. That ties us to them in a spiritual way.
We are the first descendants of this homeland, and we know how to protect it.
Our spiritual journey with the shwala is much more than we can share with you right here in front of this camera. But if you want to see what she looks like, we gifted 3 story poles at Papiaua Smaya, San Juan Island National Historical Park, for their centennial. You'll see our reef net captain, and you'll see the male and female salmon.
The captains up in the top of the reef net would be listening to the chants from the man on the beach who was guiding the salmon. And then as soon as they would see them jumping into the net, the captains would call out, and everyone that was in the canoe would be laying down so that they wouldn't be making noise or picking up on the teachings or protocols, because these people could have been family or they could have been from other tribes.
Reef net sites, they weren't bought and sold. They were actually handed down in families. So any one particular reef net site had always been run by the same family.
We're talking about the reef netters, plural, of the Salish Sea, a small subgroup of people who live within the vast variety of ethnicities of indigenous groups that live throughout. Only the northern Strait speakers had reef nets, and that would be one Klallam tribe, the Beach or Bay Klallams, the Suk, the Sangi, the Saanich, and you get to Semiahmoo, and you get to Lummi and Samish, and those are the northern Strait speakers. Pre-contact, there would be 10 to hundreds of different families within each of those nationalities who all fished and harvested in their own ways, in their own sites.
The spirit of the shwala was our economy, our way of life.
There would be such an abundance of wealth that every year, annually, one of the northern Salish Strait-speaking tribes would host the other tribe. Each tribe would go home with the overabundance of wealth that was harvested from that season. They were connected through the reef net.
It's not one government, it's 2. 2 governments infringed upon kinship in the Salish Sea. Our relatives are descendants on the other side of this imaginary border. How are we going to fix those historical events without any truth and reconciliation?
I never added up the years. 50, 60, 70 years not reef netting.
200 years is not a lot of time to do this much damage.
The handing down in families, that was all lost when that was taken away from us.
So again, I'll just thank Fishboat Media and Samuel Wolf, who directed that series. You can watch the rest of the docu-series on PBS. It's all available if you just search Origins, The Last Reef Netters. So that was part 1. And that's the only part that I'm in, but it has the poem that I wrote specifically for the series, and so I wanted to share that with you, so that you had a little bit of an understanding of what the reef net was to our people. And this next I'll share from this book, I Sing the Salmon Home, which was published by Empty Bowl Press. They're located in Chimicum, so out on the peninsula, and that's John Pierce and Holly Hughes that had that press, and it was a delight working with them. And this was produced with support from Humanities Washington and the Washington State Arts Commission as part of my final project for the Poet Laureate work that I had done, but also it was funded by a grant from the Academy of American Poets. Their Poets Laureate Fellowship was awarded to me in 2022, and I really loved putting it together. I put out a call for submissions in August, and I only had 2 months to have the call open, and I thought maybe I'll get 100 poems. I ended up getting over 700 poems from 300 different unique submitters. And that's in addition to the poems that I had kind of scurried around and rounded up prior to putting the call out for submission, call out for poems. So I was really pleased with the overwhelming response from people across Washington to this, their enthusiasm and the beautiful, beautiful words that they had to share on behalf of the salmon. It was really special. So I'll share a couple of poems from here. And the opening poem is by a Bellingham poet named Rob Lewis. And I've received permission, a waiver from everybody in the book to share their work. So I'm calling them out here. This is Rob Lewis. I went looking for the wild one. I went looking for the wild one, the howler, the Vedic tramp, the one for whom the wounded hillsides are inner burns, whose blood is stained with the old love wine of poet and earth, warrior poet, slinging battle flag out at the static, shattering polite conversations everywhere. I looked in the anthologies, listening for echoes, traced for signs in the quarterlies, magazines, best ofs. I learned it's been a good year for poetry, grants and awards coming in, contests and prizes proliferating. The wise gray consensus counsels a return to the classics. Meanwhile, poor salmon scientist holds extinction in the palm full of numbers with nothing but data to howl with. So I start off the collection with that poem primarily because I think that, we have a lot of good science and a lot of good data about the trouble we're in, but people don't know what to do with it necessarily. And even if they have that data, it's really hard to connect with it on a human level because either it's too overwhelming or an understanding of what it is at stake is not as I think as urgently presented in numbers as it is in poetry. But that's just me. I mean, I know there's probably math people out there and scientists out there going, so anyway, this next poem, so beautiful. It's another Bellingham poet, and it's Phelps McIlvaine. My daughter saw this one on the city bus, and she said, Mom, she took a picture and she said, you have to put this in your book. And I thought, oh no, how am I going to get a hold of this person? Luckily, Phelps submitted this poem through the submittable portal that I had opened up for this purpose. And so I didn't have to look too hard, but it was there. It's called Water by Salmon. As life is taught by death and the sun by space, so clouds are taught by land and rain by place. As mountains are taught by plains and rivers by lakes, so trees are taught by soils and elements by their weight. As deserts are taught by shores and ocean waves by wind, so depth is taught by height and tides by celestial spin. As sound is taught by silence and insight by reason, so humans are taught by water and water by salmon. So perfect, just perfect. Okay. I'll do two more. This one is Jeanette Rosebrook, another Bellingham poet. The Bellingham poets are cleaning up tonight, I guess. Okay, maybe I'm partial. It's called Coho Earn Carbon Credits. Coho earn carbon credits, leave direct deposits under river stones, seep slowly into the roots of red cedar and fir, transform roe and fat into the warmth of a brown bear's winter den. To calculate the carbon footprint of salmon is silly. They don't have feet. Coho are upwardly mobile, rocketing the rapids, not earning PC points or badges, or Cascadia window decals to wear proudly on their adipose fins. No need to calculate their carbon footprint. Salmon don't need to discuss offsets or rewilding, are never selfish or meta anything. It is an economy of scale. Milky swirling into a humble alchemy, and they will transform the invisible forever without us. Chutes and ladders and dams be damned. Just love all those puns. Oh, I had two more after that one. Okay, so this is Earl Thompson, and this is published posthumously with permission from his family. His relationship, he was Indigenous. The relationship is to Celilo Falls in his fishing tradition, and this is called Vigil. I dip my net, and the wooden pole with its metal rim shivers. The sky is still as a salmon flutters upward in the foaming water. In mid-river, salmon and water merge on an ancient plain, becoming momentarily white. The Columbia moves and swells, then spreads itself out, becoming a calm blue in my vision. Celilo Falls' voice is a soft breeze, nestled in bleached bones and haunting sagebrush along the shore. And I just share that poem because I think that Celilo Falls hits deep with Indigenous people of that region because, you know, it was the longest continuously inhabited fishing village, I think, in the Western Hemisphere when it was flooded to make way for the Dow's locks. And a few years ago, I'm told that they did some sort of imaging to see if the falls were still there and recoverable, and they saw that they were, and offered the tribes. They said if we let them loose again for a day to celebrate the, you know, I guess some kind of anniversary, would that be something that you would want? And the elders said, no, it's really it's like the loss of a relative, and it would be too hurtful unless you were going to bring back the falls for good. And so I just wanted to call out Celilo Falls and that fishery. And this final poem that I'll share from this collection, I Sing the Salmon Home, is by Richard Revoyer, and it is the last poem in the book, and it's called Future of Hope. A moth anchored to the web of a spider speaks. There is no hope. A spawned out salmon drifting across her red speaks. There is only hope. There is no hope. There is only hope. There is no hope. There is only hope. There is no hope. There is only hope. There is only hope. There is only hope. There is only hope. And I love the way that it looks on the page, if you see. So I think that it's important to share that poem and to conclude the collection with that poem in particular, because it is a testament to the resilience of nature and the resilience of salmon and the strength of salmon, how they persist through everything that we've put them through. You know, if you take down a dam, the salmon are there. They're just, you know, right there again, going up that river, finding the way home. And I think that it's important to acknowledge that, especially when people feel a shortage of hope in these difficult times, right? You can cast about for some good news, and it's actually, there's a lot of it out there if we just look, but it's also important to find those messages that help us to maintain hope wherever we can. So that is what I have for now to share. I'll share one more poem before we say goodbye, one of my poems, but for now, I think let's open it up to questions.
Rena, thanks so much. I might have shared this with you when we spoke recently, but I was at an event with a number of state legislators recently, and Senator Rebecca Saldana pulled out I Sing the Salmon Home. It was all dog-eared and very well read, and started our gathering with a reading from a poem from it, which struck me, so hard, just because it's a wonderful collection, and again, it was a great honor when you and Empty Bowl Press, when John and Holly reached out and invited us to be part of that. So thanks for that. So thank you for sharing your poetry and the video and the essay with us. And I want to ask a couple of questions of you, and then we'll open it up to the audience. First, I want to ask for your thoughts about the role of art and activism in promoting change in society. At SOS, we think a lot about this and have focused in recent years on ways to weave together art and artists and activism and advocacy in productive and inspiring ways. This evening, in many ways, is one example of that. So how important is art, visual art, words, music, as a vehicle or spur for social change? How do you think about these dynamics, or how does it inform your work?
Yeah, it's sort of at the heart of my work, really. And I believe deeply in the power of art to change the world. It's actually a cultural tradition for Coast Salish tribes that the world really is changed through art, our songs, our dances, our stories, that, the stories make the culture. We're culture makers, right? They shape belief systems. And so I'm here actually on the other side of that imaginary border at the University of British Columbia, where I'm studying theater. And it's interesting that there are beautiful perspectives that I've never encountered on the other side of the border, from my homelands, from our territory, and not just Lummi, but the tribes with whom we share a language group, Stalo Nation and Suquamish and others. But so it affirms, it's there, it's in the scholarship about how deeply embedded in the culture the belief is that when you create with intention, when you make a piece of art, it is going to have an impact on the world that we live in, and how different that is from colonial attitudes towards art, where it's, in many cases, especially in the theater, it's viewed for the value is its entertainment value, right? Like, where are we going to go for an evening and just spend a night, kind of shutting off the world or whatever? The entertainment value is quoted, is talked about often in these academic papers that I've been reading. And so that's just it's a very different worldview, but I don't think that it's any less true that art changes the world and creates the world, just because it is less acknowledged to do so. I think in popular culture, it really shapes how we think, what we encounter, and what we appreciate and acknowledge as art in our daily lives. And so much of the art that in popular culture just kind of goes around these really important things, and all the songs are about getting with your boo on a Friday night and going dancing. Which is fun. It's fun. But if you kind of look at Indigenous art, it's acknowledging or celebrating these relationships with the natural world. So maybe that's something to bear in mind.
Mm-hmm. That art has power.
Art has power.
Yeah, and how do we use it? I'll just reflect a little bit on what you just said and then ask another question, which is, I've been working as an advocate for salmon in their rivers for, since the mid-90s. And it's only in the last few years where I realized I sort of decided that a lot of advocates are much too focused on heads by themselves. In other words, minds and policy and action alerts and facts, and not paying enough attention to people's hearts. And that was really, I think, the beginning of a conversation that led to the programming work that weaves together the advocacy and the art in SOS, which is sort of one of our programs, the Northwest Artists Against Extinction. So I think it's real consistent with what you've just said, and I'm sorry it took me so long to sort of learn that lesson, but I'm pretty excited about the program we have now. I want to ask another question. I think a lot about silos that we or society construct for the world, and how this is often in strong contrast, in my experience, with the indigenous cultures with which I've learned about and encountered. And the silos pretend that various aspects of our lives are separate from each other. The environment here, health here, education here, food here, climate, water, what have you, economy. Relevant to this conversation, could focus in on salmon and orcas and rivers and energy and people. In the Columbia Basin, for example, wild salmon and clean and affordable energy are often pitted against each other by Bonneville and the utility sector, that we can only have one or the other. We can't have both. And these are false frames. It's a big problem that encourages, I think, simplistic thinking and false choices and bad outcomes. Our world is much more, from my view, a series of relationships than silos, right? And problems are linked and solutions need to be integrated too. Interested in just any thoughts or reflections you have on this issue of silos and how the world it really is.
Yeah, I think that it's important to also think about Indigenous ways of knowing when thinking about how to address a problem and what story we're going to tell, right? Like, because there is the acknowledgement of interconnection. In academia, you drill down, you focus deeper and deeper and deeper in one direction, right? Where I think in Indigenous ways of knowing, it's kind of acknowledging the interrelationships. But I'm reading something right now. Let me find the title. Sustainable Tools for Precarious Times, Performance Actions in the Americas. And that together with Land as Pedagogy, Anishinaabe Intelligence and Rebellious Transformations. So these are two things that I'm reading right now. But the one, Land as Pedagogy by Leanne Bedasamosaki Simpson, really, really looks at Indigenous ways of knowing and teaching and learning, and kind of learning from a place of one's own curiosity and being guided, and not so concerned with, I guess, evidence of learning as much as relationship to what was learned. It was just really beautiful. It's a beautiful paper. But yeah, it really acknowledges interconnection. And then the same with the other one, Sustainable Tools. I just read an interview with an activist, and he's talking about how important creativity is in movements and activist movements, because as soon as a movement is successful, he says, as soon as the state sees that a movement is successful, they dedicate tons of resources, or corporation dedicate tons of resources to understanding how to undermine a movement of that type. And so creativity is key, because you always have to be thinking of new ways to like drive a message forward or drive the action forward. And this is why artists and creators and theater makers and songwriters and everybody are so important to any movement, is because, there's that holistic thinking, but there's also always something new, a new way of understanding. And we're always at the vanguard. Artists and creators are always at the vanguard of what culture and what society is doing. It's part of the creative process is to kind of be engaged and intuiting what and how people are thinking and responding to that. And so, yeah, that's good. It's a good question. Thanks.
Thanks for that. I've got one more question, and then there's a few questions from the audience in comments that I want to share. Our webinar, of course, is called Reciprocity. Your essay and collection features and explores reciprocity in significant ways. I want to ask a question about this concept of reciprocity. When I first got started in my work as a salmon advocate years ago, I would often get, and I still occasionally get, the question from friends or new acquaintances, and it was often at a meal. So wait, you eat salmon and you're trying to save salmon? That isn't that a contradiction? That doesn't make sense. And then we would have a conversation about that. These comments reflect both the silos. You can do one but not the other, as well as limited understanding about how the pieces of the world in our relationships fit together, or can and should fit together. And I see this kind of perspective. We all see this kind of perspective pop up a lot in different contexts. I'm just interested if you have any further thoughts or reflections you want to share about the role and importance of reciprocity, and maybe how you can help us, the audience, think more deeply about it, and how to deepen reciprocity with each other in the world.
Yeah. I think that it's very important. If you're not partaking of a gift, then what can you feel gratitude? How can you feel grateful for it? How can you give back to something that you are not partaking of, right? So, someone who's never tasted a salmon can't be grateful for salmon, can't try to protect. I mean, maybe they could try to protect salmon, but if it's not part of your life, then you won't treasure it or try to steward it or hold it sacred the way that Indigenous peoples and cultures have held that relationship sacred. But also on a more kind of basic level, because sometimes when people think about, so sometimes people will ask me to share Indigenous wisdom, and it seems somewhat woo-woo in a way if you start talking about it, but on the spiritual level. But if you break it down to the actual level, to like the common sense reality of reciprocity and Indigenous spiritual beliefs and relationships with the natural world, it's very common sense. Like if you say what you do to the land and the water, or what, like the land and the water feed us and nourish us, and what you do to the land and the water will be done to you. It sounds a little kind of like, maybe I'm a hippie. But if you if you say since the beginning of recorded history, there is documentation of in warfare, armies poisoning wells and salting the earth. So when we poison our water, and when we don't take care of our water, and when we don't take care of our arable soil, we're really poisoning we're our own worst enemy. So if you break it down like that, then I think it's a little bit easier for the pragmatist to say, oh yeah, okay, all right, and we kind of take it out of the realm of the spiritual, but it still lives there. So
Thanks. Yeah. A couple of questions in comments that you can react to. Jane writes, Rena, how did you become a writer and poet? What is your background as a writer? Your work is so powerful.
Oh, thank you. So I have always enjoyed stories and storytelling and poetry. I've always loved the sound of language. The opening essay in my new collection starts with a story about being with my mom as a little tiny child, and I knew that if I brought her a particular Dr. Seuss book, and big surprise, it's one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish. Um, so I knew that if I brought that to her, and I still remember the pictures from when I was little, if I brought that book to her, she would do this thing that it was like singing with her voice, but it was just rhyming, right? Later, I learned how to read and learned how to rhyme, and I thought rhymes were just a superpower. So that was kind of the beginning of my love for the written word, and then it just kind of continues from there. So
Great, thanks for that. Tom says, more of a comment, but thank you for this work. I have learned that words can move mountains. Yours are strong, beautiful, powerful. We have a few mountains to move. Strive on.
we do have mountains to move. Thank you, Tom.
And then John writes, thank you, Rena. Regarding your thoughts about scientists, I am one. Scientists synthesize numbers into words of interpretation. Poets distill words into love. Love is more powerful.
I love that. That's so beautiful. That's perfect. That's what I was trying to say. So you're a poet too, John.
Sounds like it. Simeon writes, what lessons can salmon teach humans? What does water learn from salmon?
Yeah, so I think all the time about the lessons that salmon teach people. There's a salmon bearing stream near my house. It's Whatcom Creek, and it's what Whatcom County is named after. Whatcom is from the Lhaq'temish, and Hua is water. Kwum is strength or power. Whatcom, so it's a powerful water. People always say it's noisy water, but it has deeper spiritual significance than that. Kwum is strength and Kwum is power. So this water has power, and I believe it has power because it's the convergence. It's where the salt water meets the fresh. And it's in this place that salmon make that transformation. And they leave the fresh water to go out into the salt water, and they have to physically change. They can change on a physiological level to go and make that journey. And when they come home, they do it again, right? And so this is something that as an Indigenous person resonates with me, right? Because it's really nothing short of magic to exist in those two worlds. And this is something that Indigenous peoples have to do. So I draw a lot of strength from the salmon in that way. But also, if you watch them go up those rapids, it's like they're flying. It's like their whole body is just launched up the stream, and they're so persistent. And then when they get to where they're going in order to spawn, they gift everything in that stream. They bring the health, they bring the wealth of those marine derived nutrients up into those salmon bearing streams, and they feed everything there. And the generosity, right? This is how we should live. This is what I take from salmon, is that's how we should live, is just to try to give something to everything, to give of ourselves for the benefit of all. So I try to be like the salmon in that way. I fall short, but that's the aim.
Thanks, Rena. So here's a question. I'm not sure I understand it, but you might. Do you like art from the park and art in the park?
I love art in the park. There should be art. I wrote a book about beaches, and I noticed everywhere I went there were these little signposts, either about the colonial homesteaders that donated the land to the park, never anything about the tribes who originally inhabited the place, or there was information about the biology of the place or the geology of the place, never anything to have a relationship to it. This is with the exception of on the North Cascades Highway, they've put William Stafford poems out. And I remember one time pulling off at a viewpoint and looking out over this majestic vista and thinking, oh my God, it's so beautiful. And I look to my right, and there's a little placard and a William Stafford poem. And it invites you to celebrate in the party that is your life when you look over a valley like this and it begins to snow. And it was just this beautiful moment that I got to have with this poet. And I think there should be art everywhere in parks.
Thanks for that. We have two more questions, and then we can wind things down. Maybe there's a third if we have time. Raylene asks, what is your process in writing a poem? I recall late Lummi elder Chedescatum
Chadiscanum Witchtalum.
saying that he received his songs from the trees.
That resonates. I have a poem. It's called The Forest for the Trees. I think it is place-based. When I was in New York and I wrote Patriarchy Blues, I received those poems from New York, probably a lot of them from the subway. But here, when I became Poet Laureate, the first poem that I was commissioned, I received as a commission was The Forest for the Trees. And they said the request was to write a poem for their democracy issue of the Humanities Washington magazine, Spark. They're doing a special issue on democracy. And they said, what was the request? It was a really intense request, right? And so I was like, oh, okay, sure, no problem. But I was thinking, how am I going to talk about this? And I would walk around our tribal office, and the cottonwoods were going then, and it was really beautiful. And I thought, oh yeah, the trees don't really care about our discord. They're just here making air for us, and if we don't take care of the trees, we're in trouble. So the poems just kind of come from, I think, wherever you happen to be placing your attention. Yeah.
Cody asks, are there any small acts of reciprocity you practice daily that you feel comfortable sharing?
Well, I do say thank you every day when I wake up, and just for another day to be alive, to be here. Yeah, and thank you when I go to bed. I don't know who to or what, just thank you.
One last thought to share with you, maybe before I turn it back over to you. I think you might have one more poem. Cindy writes, Dr. Seuss would be so honored to learn that his stories to help begin to guide your love of words. Thank you for your heartfelt and heart-loved words to guide us to have the hope to do the work. So thank you, Rena.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll share a poem to close. And this is for the scientist who talks about poets and love. It's called To Love a Place. To love a place. To love a place, begin with songbirds, salmon runs, and blossoms of the wild sweet rose. Feed your love, let it grow. Love the low-slung clouds, heavy with their precious cargo. Love the face of the mountainside glowing in the early evening light. Love the monochrome shine of winter skies. Love the seashore's dance of waves, those eternal chorus lines with skirts of frothy lace. Love the delicate fingers of rain tapping out their lonely songs on foggy window panes. Love rain as it finds its way into every shade of blue and green and gray. Love the cycles to which our lives and habits of time are tied. From morning mist we learn to rise, while the meandering creek is proof that every raindrop finds its path through the city and to the sea at last. To love a place, become the place, and let it love you back.
Wow.
So that is for a docuseries that's coming out next year. It's the part 1 and 2 are out already, and it's just Seattle, a City in Stories, and that's from Documentary Seattle. And anyhow, that'll be out next year.
Thank you for that. A wonderful way to close. Thank you, Rena, for being here and sharing your time and your writing and your thinking and your heart with us. It's been a really wonderful conversation and time together. For the audience, if you haven't read it, I encourage you to do so. Positively Uncivilized, from Raven Chronicle Press. A great gift for yourself and for those in your loved ones, your friends and family. So thank you, Phoebe and Raven Chronicles Press and Britt from North Cascades Institute for co-hosting this evening. And I want to also thank my colleagues, Abby Sachs and Martha Campos, who are behind the scenes doing excellent work to make sure that everything went as smoothly as it did this evening. So thank you so much. And then finally, I just want to thank our audience, everyone who's joined us this evening. Thank you. Life is busy, and we're so grateful that you set some time aside to gather together. I hope that you enjoyed it. Let's stay in touch and let's keep moving forward together. Have a good evening.
Nan sa haishkas. Rang nuch sinsa.